Did you know that there are different communication styles and different ways of how people communicate and interact socially? Did you know that if you have an understanding of what those differences are, that it would actually help you to communicate and have deeper relationships, more successful networking and collaboration? Today, we're talking about social awareness. Sounds technical, but it's actually very practical, where we're digging in and understanding three things. One, how to be curious when we're acting with people, how to be an active listener, and also establishing trust. That these skills enable us to interact in a way that allows us to be more intelligent emotionally, as well as be a more effective communicator. We're speaking with Heidi Hansen of Heidi Hansen Associates. She is a sought after corporate trainer, facilitator, and coach. She's been featured in CEO magazine as well as awarded top women in business today. Let's tune in. Morning, Heidi. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, I've been talking a lot about self-awareness and self-management the past several episodes, and I wanted to just jump right in and ask you, how does self-awareness and self-management inform social awareness, another aspect of the emotional intelligence wheelhouse?
So, from what you've described in your previous sessions, you kind of already dove into what is self-awareness and also self-management, right? So those are kind of the ground laying stepstones of emotional intelligence. And a lot of times it's really important that people understand those before they can actually jump into the social awareness piece. So the social awareness piece is the third quadrant of the four quadrants of emotional intelligence, where we're now self-aware, we know how to self-manage, and now we take that knowledge and try to apply it to the world around us. So that is really what your social awareness is taking the things you've learned about yourself and how to manage yourself, but now use those tools out in the real world. So that's your social awareness in short form.
When you look at social awareness, how does that impact then our relationship management?
It definitely should be your first step of become more curious. So part of the things we learn about when we need to get to know ourselves better, to be more self-aware, is that we definitely need to learn to be curious about the world around us. A very big part of social awareness is active listening skills. Another thing is building the bridges of trust. So those three items I would say is probably your top three to kind of become more social aware. It is making people around you feel that you're truly hearing them and you're seeing them and you're learning from them and you're interested in them.
I love that. It's so simple and straightforward. When you think of the word, when I hear the word social awareness, it sounds almost scientific.
Right.
But what you're sharing is very relational.
It is. It is. And it's I think it's one of the out of the four quadrants, I think this one when people read the title, they go a little bit, oh, I'm not sure about that. But it's not brain surgery, but it really is about applying the skill set of active listening skills and building the bridges of trust. Some people it comes easy to, other people not so much. In general, in our society, we tend to be very eager to explain ourselves or talk about ourselves or make it about us. And I think it's just part of the society we're in. And when we talk about social awareness, we really need to do our very best to step out of those zones and go to let me make it about the person that's in front of me. I love to use the verbiage of be in the place where your feet are. Because when we do that, we're present in the moment. And I think being present in the moment is very complicated today. It didn't used to be, but today we have a lot of sources that pulls us away from being part of the moment, right? Your social media, your phone, your computer,
Right.
everything else really pulls you away. Also, just a busy schedule. It doesn't have to be anything with your phone and computer. It can be that you literally have a very busy schedule and you have a long agenda for the day. So you're really tied down to, gee, what is my next step here? And when we're thinking about that, when we're in front of somebody, we're not focusing, we're not listening to them, we're not hearing what's being said. We're doing check marks in the back of our mindset, right? And that is definitely not your social awareness skill right there. I think that is one of the largest learning opportunities when we talk about social awareness is learning to truly be present in the moment. So be where your feet are and be in that moment because that's where it counts. And ideally, when we become really good at social awareness, that's how you should do anything you choose to do in your life. Like be present with everything you choose to do.
I love when you talk about be in the moment, because that definitely is a serious challenge that we all face, including myself. There's so many things going on, so many things that I'm juggling, so that when I'm actually interacting with someone, I know that personally. You're listening to the person, but in the back of your mind, you're ticking off, okay, if
Mhm.
I maybe only talk to this person for 15 or 20 minutes, then I can get these things done soon after I talk to them. And then I'm actually preparing myself for the next activity that I have to do. So I know that definitely from a personal experience. You talked about being curious, the ability to listen, and created trust. What would you say that being in the moment, which one does that tag to?
Actually, all of them.
Okay.
At different aspects, right?
Right.
So when we talk about being in the moment, so yes, we talked a little bit about you got to be good at active listening skills, paying attention to the person in front of you. So when we talk about active listening skills, I am talking about keeping eye contact with the person, uh, not interrupting.
Hmm.
We are fabulous at ending good thoughts because we interrupt all the time.
Right.
Now, here's the thing when we talk about social awareness, it is also about our communication skills. How good are we at letting the person in front of us actually finish their thought? Um, we are a society that is on the move, and we again have that agenda rolling in our head as we're in that conversation, and we tend to interrupt. If we stop interrupting, the creativity and the productivity of the level of conversation we could have. Because when we interrupt, we literally break the other person's thought process. So they lose what they were thinking or talking about, and we may take the whole process to a whole different direction, and thereby we never actually hear what that person had to offer. So I would say one of the most important things with social awareness is to learn to not interrupt. Some people will go, I'm not bad at that. We're all bad at it. We just are. I catch myself all the time, and I literally have been doing emotional intelligence for 7 years, right?
Right.
And I catch myself, and I know from my point of view is I get so excited about the conversation I'm in that I want to share. But fact is, when you're interrupting, it is not your turn to share yet. Because when we talk about communicating, we really want to make sure that we give the person we're speaking to time to finish their thought,
Hmm.
and then we can respond back to what they heard. So when it comes to our active listening skills, number one, do not interrupt.
Hmm.
Number two, make sure you're actually paying attention to what's being said. And as you're hearing what's being said, use your body language and that way communicate to the person, I hear what you're saying. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to start doing thumbs up and things like that. But what it does mean is that if I agree, I may nod, Or I might smile, not a silly smile, because then they may go again getting distracted, right? But kind of like, oh, great point. That is perfect because when we're giving positive reinforcement about what we hear, the person in front of us get even more comfortable speaking to the topic they're trying to explain. And they, when they're comfortable, will get even better at explaining what they're talking about.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a huge thing. Do not interrupt. Use your positive body language to enforce what's being heard. If you don't like what's being heard, try not to use too negative body language. Because part of social awareness is to have your mindset being open and curious. When we're open and curious, we do not judge.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing in our society that would be wonderful if everybody implemented a little bit more, right? Because a lot of times, if you actually take the time to learn from the person in front of you, the judgment you might have been quick at doing might actually not be what it would have been in the past, if that makes sense.
Yes, I do think that currently in society that there is a lot of judgment and us not listening to one another, even with a lot of the negativity that you see in the media, social media, the news, etc.
Mhm.
These presuppositions that people have, and a lot of that, I think it comes to just not listening to other people, not taking the time to
Absolutely.
interact with people and listen, and the judgments that come because we're just not paying attention.
Yeah, and I think we tend to forget that the beauty of life is that we're not all the same and we can learn from one another.
Right.
I mean, that is literally emotional core. Take the opportunity to learn from the people around you, right? We
Yeah.
become better human beings and we become broader minded about something we may not have realized before. Not a bad thing.
Right. One of the things that I find so interesting about emotional intelligence is this cycle. Like, I didn't really realize, I actually sat in one of your classes. I was getting
Mhm.
my CPE credits for my CPA license that I have to do annually. And I really enjoyed the class. And what stood out to me is the cycle
Mhm.
of, or you say quadrants, but I call it a cycle,
Right.
because at the end of the day, we can have relationships with people and we're struggling to understand, why are things not working out? Why are people responding to me this way? Or why am I having conflict? But
Right.
according to this cycle, which it really is, what that we
Mhm.
walk through every day, it starts with being aware of how we're coming across. That we
Right.
literally can't have great relationships if we are not aware of ourselves, if we're then not managing ourselves correctly, and then being socially aware. And I think a lot, whether it's in business or in ministry, that we talk a lot about building relationships. We talk a lot about like the fruit of the spirit, which is how you conduct oneself. But the concept of social awareness is not really something that's readily taught. And
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times this social awareness is kind of the forgotten part of
Hmm.
the circle. And I love that you call it a circle because it does come all the way around. Um, you use the same tools as when you start studying self awareness. The big question with self awareness is, how do I feel? But then digging further down and ask yourself, why do I feel this way? And that kind of brings it over to your self management, right? When you do that and you learn that, you become better at dealing with people that you may normally not have an easy time communicating with.
Right.
It is perfectly natural to find that some people are harder for you to understand or get close to than others. That is just part of life. And part of that is because we have different communication styles. So when you dive into emotional intelligence and you truly learn to ask the question, how do I feel? And why does it make me feel this way? you can use that same concept in your social awareness, because what actually happens in your social awareness, when you get uncomfortable, you're having a feeling. So ask yourself, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling right now? What is it about this social gathering that I am finding uneasy? It may be a good feeling, it may be a not so good feeling, right?
Mhm.
So we want to kind of go to both of them, whether it's positive or maybe not so comfortable. At both ends of that, you do want to kind of go, why is it I feel the way I feel in this social setting? Because asking that will help you grow in your social awareness of others.
Right.
I think it's very key that we learn to realize that it's okay, we're not all the same, and there are clear different communication styles. Um, and I know I've spoken to you earlier, and part of that is if you ever do any kind of disc where you realize the communication styles that are in general, the four different styles. When you if you go learn those, you can clearly take your emotional intelligence um, bucket or circle and apply it to that, and you can actually start planning conversations prior to having conversation. If it is in the workplace, if it is in your ministry, if it is in your personal life, that's the beauty about emotional intelligence. It applies to every aspect of your life. Sometimes it actually takes planning to implement it. Conflict conversation. It can be a conversation where you go, I just don't click that. I can't put my finger on what it is. Before you go meet with that person, think to yourself, feel that way, then take it over out into the universe. How might that person feel about our conversation, right? And that's where we're taking it from ourselves into the world of going, how might they feel? Um, and when you can kind of put maybe a few bullet points to that, you can become better at guiding that direction. And that actually leads you right over to the management of the relationship. But that is really what it takes to become a very good, concise communicator. Is if you can nail down what is it that gets to me when I'm having this conversation with this person. And remember, it doesn't need to just be negative conversations. It can be any kind of conversations. Mostly these conversations is when you have that gut feeling that tells you, we just don't click. That is your, and I know that's very layman terms here, but that is literally it. Is your emotional self, this person communicates different than you would. So then it's up to you as an emotional intelligent person to be open and curious and be able to change your style to match theirs so you can have an open and productive conversation.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the key missing links when we are interacting with one another and in any setting, because we come to the conversation or interact based on where we are and then what we see. The bridge between the two is understanding that there might be understanding and appreciating the
Yeah.
fact that we have different styles, different ways of communicating, different ways of interacting. But a lot of times, if we're not already anticipating or understanding the fact that
Mhm.
there's differences, then that's where the walls come up and the judgments take place, where we say, okay, I don't click with that person. I don't like that person. They're rude. But sometimes it's not even something that that person is trying to do or put off, so to speak. It's just they're different in the way that they communicate or even in their body language.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, I think we sometimes forget we plan everything else about having a meeting with somebody, right? So
Right.
why on earth would we not plan the conversation? But I think we kind of going, oh, that's just be flowing. Well, sometimes it does not flow. And if it does not flow, that's the time we really do want to plan and kind of go, how can I use my social awareness to make this a positive experience.
Right.
So,
How can we cultivate a better appreciation of diverse thoughts and experiences with people in socially?
I think always you want to review when you've had a conversation. You can do it in a formal setting that you literally sit down at your desk and take notes. What just happened? What did I like and what did I not like? What could have and what can I do different? So the big part of emotional intelligence in general is that we move forward with life. We don't go back. We don't stay in what happened in the past.
Right.
So part of that is after you've had a conversation, if it goes really well, write down why did this go well? What worked well? If it did not go so well, think to yourself, what could I have done different? And again, that is one of those social awareness pieces is we need to learn to live in the future and moving forward.
Mm.
Because when we do that, we do address what did not work well for us, but then we actually go, how can I do it different next time?
Mm-hmm.
So if you see that, we're kind of moving forward. We're kind of doing what we call forward feedback instead of feedback just going backwards. That's a really important part of it, that you do reflect, how did something go? What could have been better? That is your emotional intelligence piece of it. How can I do it better next time? Always do that. I try to do that with anybody I speak to. If they call me and they go, I shouldn't have done that. We all have those moments in life, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said that. I should maybe have acted a different way. My approach could have been different. Always kind of go, give yourself some feed forward. What can you do different than next time? And then another very big part of emotional intelligence is that we don't hold grudges. Let it be what it was,
Mm-hmm.
and live what you're going to do next and how you would approach it different next time.
I think in corporate settings, there is more structure as it relates to dealing with situations. We may not always get it right when dealing with people on our team or dealing with people that we report to. But at the end of the day, there's this standard in place called HR and organizational behavior departments where
Right.
we have that structure
Mhm.
that we have to abide by and
Right.
how we talk to people and how we interact.
Right.
But in other settings like nonprofit, ministry, civic settings, there most often is not that standardized structure in place.
Right.
And when emotional interactions happens, exchanges between people, if people are intelligent or even just mature and how they deal with conflict or tension or just disagreements, I find that sometimes we can be very judgmental and don't just include the human aspect of it.
Right.
And one thing that I try to tell people, like in ministry settings where people point the finger, well, they did this or they said that, it's like, okay, or scripture that guides us, but at the end of the day, we're still human. We're
Right.
still that we don't mean, or maybe in the heat of the moment, or we just misspoke and
Right.
people get offended. In the moment, do you have any suggestions or tactics for us of how to handle those emotional situations?
It's past tense. It already happened. It's amazing what happens when you say, I'm truly sorry.
Hmm.
A lot of people do not take the time to actually pause and be silent. So sometimes we need to learn when not to speak. So if we are in the moment of where we probably were going to say something we might regret later, pausing and listening, again, back to your active listening skills, but also taking the time to think is a beautiful thing. We do not take the time to actually have silence in conversations, and especially not in heated moments. They are worth gold. When you pause, number one, the conversation stops, right? But it also calms everybody down if it is a heated conversation or a very emotional conversation. But what it also does for you, it gets your moment to reset your mindset. As you grow your emotional intelligence, you always want, is this really what I want to say? It is okay to actually pause and say, let's just take a moment of silence and reflect. Because when you do that, you stop that train that's running off the track. Also, if you're having a conversation with somebody and you don't respond right back, it is perfectly fine to say to them, even if it is kind of an emotional or heated conversation, hold on, I'm thinking. What that does, it makes your brain stop. It makes their brain stop. And hopefully with that, you can change where the dialogue would have gone. Because sometimes we just need that break to think about what is it truly I want to say. And you will find that extroverts tend to speak their thoughts as they're talking. Introverts are thinkers more. They have to think about what they want to say. So like you probably have heard people say before, I have to think before, can I think about this before I respond, right? That usually would be a typical introvert person that actually have to think, how do I want to respond? So people that tend to speak their thoughts in heated moments, they're better off if they literally can hold their tongue, think, and then respond. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of power in the take time to think.
And I've been in those situations where it's a heated conversation and a person will say, I'm going to stop this conversation. Their silence is just getting off the phone and saying, I'm going to stop this conversation because I'm very angry right now. And if I continue, I'm going to say things that I can't take back. So just give me some time and let's revisit the conversation.
If the other person hang up on you and you're not done talking, that does not give a good feeling of the person that is a talker to solve issues, right? So instead of maybe, I heard what you said when you just said what you said about, I need to think, I'm going to say things that I don't mean. Those are all good things to express. But if you're talking to a person that solves issue by talking, you're literally cutting them off at the knees. So if we do say that, which is not, it could be a smart thing to do, right? The verbiage you want to use is, yes, I'm going to say things that I may not want to be saying, but also I think we both need to reflect on how can we do better? Like, kind of like, it's not you, it's not me, it's us. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to touch on as key elements of truth for us that we need to be more aware of socially?
I think it's important that we actually dare to be who we are. Now, that does not mean that if you are a mean old person, that you are allowed to go be mean to people around you. What it does mean is you should be honest with yourself and live an authentic life, meaning that you live true to yourself. Again, that does not mean that when you meet other people you may not agree with or anything, that you could just be mean as ever. Because you should use your emotional intelligence skills and not do that. Because remember that whole piece of being accepting of people that are different from yourself or not understanding others. But I do think it's important that we study our personality, we study our mindset well enough that we know what we need to do to live the best possible life for ourselves in an authentic way. and truly be present in the moment and be very intentional with everything we choose to do.
Yes, that's so
Um,
good.
and sometimes that means you do less than you're currently doing on your schedule because sometimes we're so overbooked that we're truly not being intentional with everything we're trying to do.
I had a guest who spoke about something. He was focusing on self-management, and he
Mhm.
shared that in a moment he was addressing his team. He was a pastor, and he just went into a tirade. And it was at that moment that he realized that he could either justify his behavior as the leader, or he could apologize, and he could recognize where did that come from and what does he need to deal with. And
Right.
so he could accept responsibility. It's not good, it's not healthy, but deeper issues within himself to address.
Yeah.
And I think emotionally intelligent that we move away from always pointing the finger at
Mhm.
other people and what's wrong with them, but walking through the quadrants, the buckets, the cycle to say, to be aware with self, manage self, of thought, diversity of communication styles, and those differences, because I think that is what makes us have a healthy IQ or EQ related.
You said it so well. I absolutely agree. It starts with oneself. It absolutely does. If you can't identify your own emotions, how could you possibly identify other people's emotions? And when we talk about emotional intelligence, that's what it's all about, right? Recognizing and being able to manage one's emotions, but also be able to recognize and understand the emotions of others. And then in your relationship management cycle, that's where you go in and actually are able to help others grow and their emotional intelligence.
Right. Can you share a bit about your services and how people can reach out to you if they'd like?
Yes, so I have been in training and development and corporate training for the past 12, 13 years. God knows it's adding up. Um, I call myself a communications coach. I do a lot of emotional intelligence. I do that at a corporate level. I go in and I can also do it at events as well as topics. I also do a lot of communications areas in general. I'm also DISC certified. I find that doing the DISC and emotional intelligence truly gives a very strong toolbox for every individual that take those topics to really become an excellent communicator. So I have done a lot of that as a combined kind of seminar because it truly empowers people. I do that. I do a lot of conflict resolutions in the leadership realm. Mhm.
Okay. And just define for us, what does DISC mean?
This is your, oh, that's such a good thing. But what does it mean? So literally, if you ICS, it will come up for domains of communication styles.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with them, but then I recognize not everyone is aware of
Right.
it. How can people reach you?
I do have an email, but also a website. My website is www.HeidiHansenAssociates.com. My email is Heidi@HeidiHansenAssociates.com. It's a terrible email to type out.
No worries. This has been so insightful and just some awesome tactics and things to help us become more socially aware. Thank you so much, Heidi.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blessing. Thank you.